women in the World Cup are being paid less than men, and therefore tremendous sexism, America's a terrible place, yada, 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 yada. There's an editorial, an op-ed in the Washington Post today called "The Biggest Fight Facing the U.S. Women's Soccer Field Isn't on the Field." Despite far greater success than the men's national team, the women have had to go to court to try to secure equal pay. There's an op-ed in the New York Times called "Sex, the World Cup, and Breaking Up the Boys Club" by Emily Ryle, teaching philosophy at the University of Gloucestershire. Great sport requires only three things: excellence of skill, uncertainty of outcome, and a crescendo of drama until the last second. Gender or sex is irrelevant. Well, it's relevant to some of those things, right? Excellence of skill, gender and sex may in fact be relevant to that, considering that men are generally better at sports than women because they have different musculature than women and different skill sets than women. In the same way that a Little League game is not the same as a Major League Baseball game, certain sports are not the same if men and women play them. The WNBA is not the same as the NBA. There's a reason no one is paying to watch women shoot layups, as opposed to, dunking and shooting three-pointers and all of that. And yet there is this push that is on to suggest that women are being victimized by the World Cup and by the U.S. soccer program because they're not being paid the same as the men. This is absolutely silly. It's absolutely silly. MLS is a successful league in the United States, the soccer league. The MLS league has been successful for 10 years. It took a while for it to grow, and now it's doing quite well. After every Women's World Cup soccer victory, there is an attempt to start a women's league. Every single time it fails. Every single time. That's because there just is not enough of a crowd of people who are willing to watch women play soccer. And the reason that there is not that huge crowd of people, and that we all pretend to love women's soccer every 4 years, and we pretend that it's super serious sporting and all this. The Olympics always draw a lot of attention. The World Cup always draws a lot of attention. The Women's World Cup always draws a lot of attention. But how much attention does it actually draw? Well, in 2010 in South Africa, the Men's World Cup earned $4 billion. The Women's World Cup earned $73 million. For those who are not good at math, that means the Men's World Cup earned 54 times what the Women's World Cup earned. The reason for that, again, is because people aren't as interested in women playing soccer as men playing soccer, not because they are sexist, but because women are not as good at soccer as men. The Women's World Cup national team lost 5-2 to an under-15 boys club from Dallas a few years ago. The Australian women's national team lost 7-0 to an under-15 boys team in Australia. People say, oh, those were just scrimmages. Okay, imagine the men's World Cup team losing to an under-14 boys team. Is that a thing that would happen unless they actually threw the game? Of course not. Men and women are different. Pretending that men and women are not different ends in stupidities like the idea that women and men have to be the same for performing absolutely differently on the playing field. But this is how you end up with this piece from Emily Ryle saying, in a soccer match last year, a ball tumbled aimlessly into the penalty area, almost like a confused pedestrian about 13 yards from the goal. Two players, caught off guard by its awkward bounce, missed it, but it was seized upon and just as quickly thumped into the top corner of the net by a storming attacker's foot. Hit with such zip, it seemed the goalkeeper couldn't see it, much less stop it. It's the kind of goal you watch again and again, pressing replay on your phone. It's the kind of skill that led the attacker who scored the goal, the American soccer star Lindsay Horan, to be among the first players nominated for the first women's Ballon d'Or prize, the sport's most prestigious annual award for best player that for 61 years was awarded only to men. There's arguably more excitement to this Women's World Cup than any before it, but the specter of the best player in women's soccer not participating on its biggest stage looms large, a battle being jointly led by the Australian and American teams to equalize the $370 million gap in World Cup prize money is making headlines too. The American women are also suing separately their national federation over purposeful gender discrimination based on continued pay gaps, despite years-long periods they point to in which the women's team appeared to earn more for the national federation than the men's. The collective effect has been a reigniting of perennial debates over the nature and perception of women's sport. Again, if we cannot acknowledge that there is a difference between the men and the women, then I do not know why we have eyeballs and functioning prefrontal cortexes. But this lady basically, she says, the semifinal between Serena Williams and Justine Henin in the 2003 French Open was as nail-biting a drama as any face-off between Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal has been at that same tournament. Okay, that's completely subjective, but what does that actually have to do with the viewership? I would not tune in specifically for a match between Serena Williams and Justine Henin. I wouldn't. I would tune in specifically for Federer and Nadal because they are both better players than Serena Williams and Justine Henin. By the way, Serena Williams will acknowledge this. It's Serena Williams, before she sort of got on the woke bandwagon with regard to men and women have exactly the same skill sets, she would openly admit that she couldn't play in the men's league because she is not a man and does not have the same skill set as men. She's the best woman to ever play. She is better than nearly every man who has ever lived, except for every active professional men's tennis player. She ranks by statistics among second-tier college men's players. That is not a rip on her. She is, again, the best woman to ever play. But that is not the same thing as saying she is one of the best men to ever play. This is also silly. But I guess it goes part and parcel with the attempt to obliterate sex as a valuable statistic and as a valuable distinction to be made in terms of biology.